So those were the big structural things. We're recording. The last one was to an exercise from Jesse was to notice that this present moment is the moment that like is just a beautiful moment. Just my life in the present moment is just this is it. I am traveling through the journey of my life, and this moment has just a little bit of joy in it, and just to offer that practice a couple times a day. You're like, I'm here, and this is it. Like looking around, such a beautiful moment. But yeah, other than that, retreats have an ineffable quality that is very hard to describe. And maybe I'll pass over to some of the other people that were there to add their comments. Specifically, let's go for Rob.
A bit of diffusion of responsibility going there, I think. So yeah, this was my first exposure to Integral. So I came in without, intentionally without reading a lot about it to the retreat. So so I'll kind of cover the things that I think came out of that, but some of them might be things that everyone's already familiar with. So for me, the retreat was a combination of a few key experiences. There was like a lot of work with consciousness and awareness. There was a lot of work with emotion in various contexts, particularly fear, joy, like fear and joy, anger, and sadness. And there was also, I guess, like a lot of using the concept of survival strategies as a lens, which we all found, I think, really useful, and I think might have been a new concept that was focused on in this retreat. And what Elliot refers to as this sort of ineffable quality, I think, is I would describe it as sort of a way of holding space, like a container in that environment, which draws in things from the people who are there. And for me, that space, I was talking to Lee about this afterwards, that the space was probably the most powerful element of that experience for me. And it really woke up something that I'd describe as maybe an energetic sense in me that I'd been in denial of, like I'd had been called intuition perhaps, but been in denial of my whole life. Because I had this really strong and clear read of the emotional state of everyone else at the retreat continuously, which was quite overwhelming. And that's kind of continued with me since, much stronger as well. So it was, there was just so many, it was this powerful combination of ideas and lenses that, and then the ability to practice them. So like on the energetic sense, for example, like I would have had these intuitions around, I think that person's in this state many times in my life, but then dismissed it as something that wasn't, like that's probably wrong. But at the retreat, I just go and ask the person and be like, hey, is this what's coming up for you at the moment? And they almost always say, yeah, that's exactly what's coming up. Sometimes really complex things. Like I said to Jesse, I really like, there seems to be quite a lot of stuff happening for you here in this moment. Conflicting things, and you've got, like you've kind of got this like projected sense of boredom, but you've got, this playfulness coming up in you and all of these other things happening at once. So I just feel like I can't get a read on your emotional state. And he said, I feel seen because that's exactly what's happening for me. You just described all of it. And I thought, isn't that fascinating, right? Like, and so having that ability to tune those perceptions for me was really, really precious. And I could go on for an hour about different experiences and observations that I've had since the retreat and how I've integrated those, and various layers of realizations around where the work is and that journey. But this is a 9-person call, so I will yield the floor. And I guess it's my job to tag the next person. Yeah, so, well, okay, well, I guess it's Elliot's job to tag.
Talk. She might be busy on public transport.
I'm on a bus.
Sounds like a perfect time to tell us all your stuff.
Well, Jesse and I spoke quite extensively after the retreat. So my retreat kind of didn't end, and until about a week ago when I went to silent meditation, and then he's now in the middle of a 17-day silent meditation. So he's going to wake up to a very different world when he comes out at the end of the month. And yeah, I'm still not processed from the retreat. I went and read through my notes again a couple of days ago, and it feels like it was such a long time ago. And also I feel like a completely different person. I feel like I had actively poked and prodded myself in the month leading up to the retreat because I wanted to bring things out of me. And I'm very glad that I did that. And yeah, I feel like a completely different sense of myself going through this. It hasn't quite set in a particular groove yet. I mean, the groove is there of the sense of a much greater sense of awareness of who I am and who I get to choose the role that I want to play of myself in this. And I'm sort of defining new edges for who that role is going to be. Not sure if that makes sense at all. But yeah. I mean, there was definitely one aspect of with the retreat was we went into a lot of I had a chat with Ryan this morning, and that's why I invited him on the call today. But we had I did a lot of exploring I've done like a lot of exploring of my dark shadow side. And as I said with Ryan this morning, what I realized through the Vipassana retreat was that it's actually my light shadow side is where I need to embrace more now. And so for me, going into the darkness and embracing like all the worst parts about me is really kind of fun and easy and confronting in an enjoyable way. Like it's a good pain to me. And now choosing to find all the good parts of me that I've disowned, that's actually really, really quite uncomfortable. So that's where my next focus is going to be, which is interesting because we're talking partly about shadow work today on this call too. So I will hand it off to who else have we got here?
To Lou.
To Lou.
Hi. All right, where do I start? So for me, yeah, pretty much re-emphasizing what the others said. For me, the biggest thing was being given a big challenge. Jesse had given me, Elliot, I'm not sure what that cough was. Being given a big challenge of just being me, because I've had this fixation of getting myself out of the way for the last couple of years, because that was what I was told to do. And yeah, being given that challenge of being me was something that was really big for me, and I did that pretty well. And then coming out into the real world, I know for the first couple of days I didn't want to get into the world again, and but just noticing things, catching things a lot more now, being aware of utilizing the survival strategy that we learnt, and which just catching where I'm drifting off to, or if I'm running an emotion and just feeling into it. And I don't know, I'm just lost. I guess this is probably kind of a little weird for me. So honestly, this is probably a little weird for me, and I think not being with everyone like in a room is probably what's making it kind of tricky for me. So so I'm lost with words. But basically, it was an awesome, a really awesome place. It's a place where I having my trauma, my own sort of trauma. Never really being able to feel love the way that I felt it when I was in the room, love and compassion. both Jesse and Lee, it gave it to me in a way that I'm actually embodying it as much as I can in my day-to-day life now. And being in a room with such awesome people, and then sharing our stories and so forth was just really amazing. And as I'm saying this, I realize me being honest just a moment ago, saying this is uncomfortable, has made me comfortable to be able to say all of this. So that's an awareness in itself. Just an amazing experience. What else? I think that's me. Thanks.
Thank you.
There's an interesting, this is an interesting aspect of the follow-up from the retreat, right, is touching on what Lou said, where she just realized that, like, so her behavior there was different, like in expressing that discomfort than it would have been before the retreat. And the Lou that I met on the, we drove up together. And it was like, you know, you just then realize, Lou, that change has happened in you. For me, it was like, the big breakthrough that I had was I stepped into a grounded sense of self-compassion and love, which is something I've struggled with my entire life. And for like 4 or 5 days after the retreat, I was in that like very intense, fully grounded state. And then after a while, I kind of woke up and was like, oh, I'm not in that state. Oh no, I've lost the thing. And it took me most of that day to realize, I'm like, no, now I'm just doing the real work, right? Like, and it's like holding that awareness I found, through all of those things as they come up, and then having the ability to shape it just a little bit at a time. That feels to me like the work, Lou. And it's continued, right? Like just all of these things that were familiar before have become unfamiliar as I hold my awareness through them, and that's shaping changes in my life, and I suspect in yours as well.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is, and that actually brings me to the memories of retreat afterglow and what it's like after you've been on one of these things, in terms of life becomes this much more vivified experience, perhaps. And the other things that I was hearing in there as connectors was the survival skill. Like with the survival skills, I'm like, oh, that's very smart in terms of safety. So it's usually more challenging to feel into parts of ourselves that are less comfortable, or just that we haven't seen before, unless there's a lot of safety kind of thing as well. So the retreat environments usually provide a context where a lot of care is taken in such a way as that cognitively, emotionally, through the whole of being, you're made very aware that you're safe, kind of thing as well. And through that, those opportunities, as Kat was beautifully describing as well, of exploring dark side stuff kind of thing as well, but also just the stuff that I don't usually go there. I don't like to think nice thoughts about myself or something that I would do, that can actually become possible in new ways, often in retreats. It's interesting to think about how we can support those in this kind of environment. Conversations for a different time, perhaps. But thank you all for the little tasters kind of thing of everyone's unique experiences. To connect a little bit as well, what I was thinking I'd do next is talk a little bit about when I'm thinking this through, actually it connects most closely to what Kat was describing in terms of kind of when we have experiences which bring us to a new sense of who we are. Often what we're seeing at that point is the ways that we're self-contradictory or being hypocritical, or where we might be seeing that out in the world a little bit more, depending on a bunch of other factors. So I was going to do a kind of download of some thinking about, it connects to our historical moment as well, processes of de-development. So not when we talk about development, development's usually the glue that holds together, no matter where you are in the integral framework. Development is kind of the glue that holds it together. Development sometimes crossed over with evolution, but development generally. What we don't have good maps for is how do you de-develop something consciously? to actually step into some new version of what is already unfolding, right? Because it's not as if our environments around us aren't changing already. So de-development is a concept. These conversations that I'm going to be referring to come through from Tom Murray, who some of you know I've done a little bit of work with before. And so some of the ideas of this are other things as well. If there's something that you want to say at any point in time, maybe just pop up your, like start waving on screen. There are little ways to raise your hand in the participants list, but mine's a bit cramped at the moment because I'm on one of my smaller screens. So I mightn't see you. So just wave. Yes. And to check in on that as well before I keep going ahead. So I was going to do a little bit of talk about de-development, or, you know, stepping out of the evolutionary curve and into more of the involutionary curve of...
I put the picture of the up in complexity, down in spirituality into the Facebook.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So involution. Yeah, the involutionary arc is sort of what I'll be talking to for a little while. And then we can shift into the questions, which I'm going to confuse everybody and post those in the Zoom chat kind of thing, although I can see Elliot's posts coming through on the other chat behind as well. But
I
yeah.
can copy it across. The trouble is Zoom deletes the chats when you end the call.
You can save them.
Yeah, it's all right. I'll just post it across. Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
thank
once
you,
you stop the call, you don't have access to the chat anymore, and that's, yeah, cool. Okay. All right. Okay, so involutionary curve. So, and this is going to work with a structure, a basic four layer structure for development kind of thing as well. So if we start with perceptual, then go to cognitive, then go to rational, then go to post-rational kind of thing as well. So perceptual is mostly the levels of felt being, experiencing. Cognitive is understanding that we're actually able to have mental interactions with that. Cognitive doesn't only mean thinking, it can also be acknowledging of emotions, but if you think about that, acknowledging of emotions actually requires thinking. Rational starts to dip into more of the putting together abstract systems in order to make meaning, so or in order to make other systems, that sort of thing. And then post-rational is realizing the way that multiple systems interact, come into being, go out of being, have generations of interacting chains with each other that kind of each node or, you know, contact pointers can kind of be this opportunity of something completely different and new kind of thing. Okay, so we've got those four levels. And what we're describing in terms of involutionary curve is that mostly when we talk about development, we kind of talk about it in very Western concepts of gain, right? That you actually gain more complexity, you gain more subtle understandings and ways to integrate these subtle understandings with what's coming into being. You gain insight about what's actually going on for other people around you in other parts of the world. You gain insight on how to make best adaptive use of systems in the most accurate way to actually benefit the whole kind of thing as well. So we're mostly talking about, when we talk about development and evolution, really usually in the integral terminology of it, it's mostly about gaining. Now, if you think about that, that's a little bit interesting, because what we know of developmental shifts is that you have to let go of what was previously your worldview in order to embody, embrace, enact a new worldview. And the curiousness that came around, I was in Connecticut with Tom and we were walking through winter leaves kind of thing, and these composting, like they were all pretty grotty and disgusting kind of thing as well. And it was like, how does death of things give birth to new life kind of became the orienting modality. And so what we've been working on so far is this idea that, and this is certainly open for input. We're very welcoming of any ideas on this. At the perceptual level, you destruct what does not serve or what you cannot tolerate, what does not fit within your unified frame of selfhood. Because it's the thing about involution that we were kind of exploring as well. Involution seeks unity. Evolution actually always moves towards complexity. And so that it a little bit inverts Wilber's storyline about we're always moving into a greater whole. In a way, yes, because evolution does not happen without involution, but it's kind of reversing that arc to say the movement upwards or outwards or bigger levels of embrace is always into more complexity. Involution is always into unity. So at a perceptual level, what does not fit into the self structure, destruct, destroy it. At the cognitive level, what does not fit into the self structure, deduct. You know it's not going to destroy you, but you just don't need it because it doesn't serve very much. So if I'm orienting to more positive psychology in how I'm thinking about how I want to be in the world, I'd just not think angry thoughts anymore. I'd deduct them from my mind. I'd kind of, I know they're there, but I can remove them. They're still able to stay as they are, but I'm eliminating them from my self structure, kind of thing. Yep, all good so far. Okay. Rational, deconstruct. When you're at rational mind, what you actually seek to be able to do is to be able to pull it apart in a way where you know how it came apart, in order that, if needed, you can put it back together, but you're probably not wanting to put it back together because you didn't like it very much. We're still at, below second tier kind of thing, or second, hovering around second tier kind of thing in this space. So what you would do with something that did not serve the you would be just to deconstruct it, kind of thing. Again, if you needed to, you can reconstruct it. When you reconstruct it, you could reconstruct it with new parts, is the thing about that differentiates it from just the conceptual mind. All making sense so far? Yeah. So we got deconstruct and what that would imply. Okay. Post-rational, degenerate. What you're actually doing with the thing that does not serve you in post-rational mind is allowing it to die so fully that its new life to you is as yet unknown, and you're okay with that, right? Like, so you're actually able to completely drop into the bottom of you, for those of you that are familiar with you theory, drop into an unknowing, be safe in your unknowing, and allow that as the new formulation of whatever it is starts to unfold, that you can engage with it and karmically bring forth what's needed, kind of thing, in the new, unfolding of what is, sort of thing. Okay, that was all a lot of content. Does that all make some sense?
I want to add one thing.
Yeah, go.
Which is, I have this sort of question mark around complexity. If we have a mind moments model that suggests we can only have one thing in awareness at once, which means that if we want to get more in touch with the world and get more complicated, we do have to let things go because we can only have one at a time. So to have more within that limit, we have to, like you said, let go. And that's the deduct or deconstruct those things of removal of the things that are there but not important, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay, I see you wanting more or something.
I kind of wasn't sure. It's like, so are you saying we can only have one thing in our mind at a time?
That's the proposal of the mind moments model.
Right.
There's only one sensation in awareness at a time. And if it's a thought or a body sensation or something else, there's only one at a time. So if we want to get more we don't get, there's like a limit there. And within that
Yes.
proposal.
One of the reasons to practice is to facilitate the opportunity that so the mind moments model, which is distinct from the Hindu model of constant consciousness available in all times, in all places. There is a Buddhist model, which is moment to moment, the whole of reality comes in and goes. And that I'm just connecting as well. You might be connecting a little more to studies in cognitive science, where the idea that we can multitask. We're fooling ourselves if we think that we can multitask. That body of literature, is that what you're connecting to?
Yeah, that and the Mind Illuminated, the meditation stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, the meditation stuff. The point of getting really, really good meditation practice is that you are honing your attention in such a way where you're actually able to pay attention moment to moment to those changes and karmically interact with it. Like that's the bodhisattva work kind of thing. Ultimately, is to refine your meditative. I'm noticing that Kat has unmuted, which might mean that she wants to say something. So let me pass over and check. Kat.
I'm sorry, I thought I had muted before. I was just bringing up the question of how does that then link through to awareness of awareness? As in, there are multiple layers of sensation, and I mean, one of the things I experienced with Vipassana this past week was bringing together the thought, the feeling, and the sensation and the awareness into cohesion, and in that they're separate but not separate. I don't really know how to use words to explain it, but I was sort of playing with the different ways of observing in my being of that, and trying to to have the experience of the multiple sensations at once.
Can I drop an idea in and see if it resonates? Perhaps there is truth to the idea that Elliot broached from Mind Moment, that at any instant we experience a singularity of some kind, but perhaps the singularity we experience is a whole-on at different orders of magnitude at any time. So we're experiencing the one thing, but composed of many, many things. And that, so it's possible, I suppose, to the memory of diversity exists in the whole-on of singularity at any instant. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, it's almost like in order to climb up to a bigger whole-on, we have to ignore some of the parts of the smaller, so that we're at a new level of complexity, but there's still only one thing.
I find it an intriguing idea.
Yeah, there's an author called Jason Brown. I'll actually see if I can find some of his work to send around. So he connects cognitive science with Buddhist Madhyamika, I think it is, process philosophy, to talk about microgenetic consciousness, where exactly what you're describing, Kate. Like, so what is true is that our brains are too slow to keep up with what our minds are capable of attending to, kind of thing. That's sort of the crux of it. So if you're becoming more available within practice, kind of thing, to all that you could possibly experience, and all that experiencing is, to step it beyond just the body-based nature of that, it's possible to actually sense the interaction, I guess, of and even the body systems, and how body systems actions themselves can generate little emotional experiences, tiny feeling senses that can conglomerate together into something like an emotional experience as well. It's definitely, yes, so that happens. That's well tracked in meditation literature kind of thing. So and not distinct from, you can still have the mind moments model or microgenetic account of consciousness, and it fits kind of thing. It's just our brains are a little slow. Yeah, go for it, John.
This reminds me of Wilber's phrase of total, he calls it the total picture of all that is. And I think he's talking about in the moment, whatever our total picture is, a bit like what Kat was talking about. And that's also very much the tantric approach of bringing in awareness of different sensations and different modes of awareness into the present moment. I think they can go together. I don't think they're contradictory.
Yes, bringing us around. Oh, sorry, Rob. Yeah.
That's all right. I just wanted to share like this is not like I don't tend to formulate my knowledge, I guess, from reading a lot of other people's stuff. It's just like I work things out on my own. So this is not like from somewhere, but it always feels to me like we have like all of these things are just lenses on the same truth at the same time, right? So like emotions, thoughts, body sensations, in Vipassana, I think that that's something that actually really comes up, right? Is that like you might be looking at what Goenka would call a gross sensation, and then later you might be able to see that same sensation from a completely different lens, that and it's a different experience of observing it. And in the same sense, I think like time is another lens, right? Like we have this idea that only one thing can happen at the same time, but in some sense everything happens at the same time. And so it's like, that's, for what it's worth, that's an idea around how to unify all of that stuff into one concept.
Yes, that's very cool, and starts to bring us to as well, theme wise, segues, I like segues, to the performative contradiction piece kind of thing as well. Partly because when we start to talk about truth, we get into interesting spaces. And one of the things that we can acknowledge that's happened pre-coronavirus is this notion of living in this post-truth world, where it seems like some of the, and it's definitely only that it seems like some of the shifts that had happened in postmodern philosophy have been opportunistically used kind of thing to create our own truths in certain quarters of the world that we live in kind of thing. To step away from that for a moment though too, so one of the reasons I think that we came to this particular topic is that it kept coming up in our Sydney Integral meetings, that we noticed the ways where self-contradiction becomes apparent, particularly as you start to refine attention and awareness kind of thing as well. So more subtle noticing means you have more information. And inevitably what's going to be the case, particularly if you take a Hegelian view, but even without turning to philosophy, I guess it's just possible to notice this in lived experience, the ways that information about myself may contradict itself for me kind of thing as well in my awareness. There's probably examples of this I can think of. Me, right? Like, so I both like to self-isolate. I didn't know that it was actually called self-isolating, the thing that I already do with my life. But I also like to get out and actually interact with people. And the whole shift in careers for me kind of thing, out of the work that I had been doing and into the psychology work, was needing to connect with others kind of thing too. So there's these two sides that don't seem to fit together particularly well. That's just contradiction itself. It's not actually what's talked about in terms of performative contradiction. When performative contradiction is talked about, that is usually where the content of the proposition is somehow contradicted by the foundation of what is needed to make the statement in the first place. The way that this comes into integral context is in terms of a fight against reason, for example. So say taking a particular stance where reason is unreasonable, but to demonstrate that reason is unreasonable, what you have to use is reason, right? Like, so it's where the ground itself that would actually support the argument is contradicted by what is said within the argument. And so these claims of performative contradiction come up. It comes up by a bunch of folk from the 1970s onwards. I think Austin was the first person that used it. Habermas is another theorist who really developed this concept, critiquing the work of Foucault and Derrida, although Derrida was also critiquing the work of Foucault in terms of, and that was some interesting, Derrida to Foucault was really interesting as well, because this was a critique of madness, right? Like, so Foucault was saying, we should just allow the mad to speak. And Derrida was saying, to actually allow that to happen, you need to acknowledge how madness itself has been socially constructed. Madness does not really exist if we're just living our lives and walking around in the world bumping into trees and whatever. It's actually a shared social meaning, and you've got to kind of pull apart what does madness mean to get to an understanding of what does it mean to give someone who's inhabiting the label of madness the opportunity to speak. John, just to check, because you're our integral guru, was there anything particularly about performative contradiction that you had in mind or that you were wanting to add?
No, Trish. I know that Wilbur has spoken a lot about it, but I haven't given it much thought or done any research into it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I had something. For me, my understanding, and I have not used the term performative contradiction before, but for me it was sort of the noticing of when our signaling is different to our revealed preferences. So where we might say, oh, I'm a person who likes to be social, but then don't actually spending time talking to someone. Or typically in a lot of the green stuff we're seeing is a lot of the virtue signaling where people like to be seen as someone who's a good person without actually doing the things that would make the difference to what they say their intent is to do. So I guess that's sort of my aspect on that, and how we look at where we might be doing that in our own lives, of where we might be where it might not be visible to us as well. And it's often easier to be pointing it out in someone else than it is in ourselves.
Can I ask a question? I'm kind of curious as to how does just a general contradiction, or even, I guess, contextual behaviors differ from what you guys are trying to talk about here? A good example would be, even going back to your example, Trish, like, I don't know how much of that is a contradiction so much as having a different behavior depending on kind of different moods or different characteristics of goal achievement. If you look at things like some of the personality metrics and stuff like that, psychometrics and stuff like that, there's often stuff that talks about adaptive behaviors and how you might have, your base behavior may be to self-isolate, for example, but in order to achieve certain things or to do something in a different context, you adapt your behavior to suit. And I'm also thinking about it just in the context of, different modes or different different, or even different moods kind of thing. Like I'm pretty similar. I don't necessarily think that I have a lot of self-contradictory aspects, but at the same point, I also highly recognize a lot of my behaviors are highly dependent on the situation. And I know I'm also a highly adaptive person though as well. So I don't know how much that changes the context.
Yeah, my example might have been a bad one as well, in terms of performative contradiction compared to more general contradiction kind of thing as well, and the acknowledging of responsivity, because I think that's sort of what we're coming around to as a bit of a theme, is there's, and to connect a little bit, I guess, to what Kat was sort of pointing to as well, there's what we hold in mind as a preferred stance, which may be distinct from the actual behavior in the actual moment, given the actual context within which we find ourselves. There's a reconciliation that you can do about that. And those sorts of reconciliations can happen in all sorts of different ways. It's extending self-forgiveness, self-compassion is one of those things, extending forgiveness to others, or compassion to others, I guess, as other ways to think of that. To question, is there a need to resolve the contradiction, is an interesting thing. Let me think. Yeah, sorry, Ryan, did you have
as a follow-up, further question, I guess, as well, as if I'm also thinking about it, if what you're describing is more of, and I guess what Kat was describing is more of people having kind of masks and stuff different faces that they show to different people, which are intuitively false personas, versus, thinking of yourself in a certain way, thinking that you're, for a while, I had a very strong perception about being, very understanding and listening very intently to a lot of people. And within a particular context, a group of people, I was very shocked when I realized that the perception was that I had a very intense and almost aggressive perception, even that was completely the opposite of how I felt. And I actively cultivated, like, even before I was aware of that, like, I actively cultivated a certain behavior that was counter to that. And so it wasn't a false perception, or it wasn't a false mask that I was putting on. I actually thought I was feeling that way until somebody kind of pointed out, it's like, actually, we think this is the case. And that was a really useful insight for me, but also I'm not sure if that's how much we're talking about in something like that.
I can relate to that.
I want to jump in and add an exciting thing. So I made a quite good new friend this week. We spent hours and hours talking, and there's one thing that this friend can do, which is to be very sarcastic. And what I've ended up doing is trying on a lot of masks. So she, we've been playing with the type systems, feminine and masculine, and she'll be like, well, that's because you're weak. And I'll be like, yes, I am weak. I will put on the weak mask. And, sometimes that makes me kind. And I can try and add that mask on top. I'm acting out of kindness because I'm also weak and I care about other people. And being able to fluidly try on as many masks as I can, as quickly as I can pick them up, put them on, use them as a lens, and then drop them, has become a really joyous activity to flow in and out of. Anytime I'm someone might come, what's an example? Like the weak one is a good example. Like what would it be if I were walking around the world doing exactly as I was, and I was in fact weak? And that may not be a perception, that it may have been in my shadow. A part of me would be afraid to be weak. And now I'm like, oh, I can just own that and walk around in a weak way and enjoy being weak for a moment. And then I can take that mask off and be like, well, actually, it's very strong to wear a weak mask and to pretend to be that thing temporarily. And in that sense, that performative contradiction is to step in and out of many ways of being. And what I really would like to do is get that subject-object shift where the masks become objects. That I can, like, all of the masks are different objects. And I have way more freedom in my being because I can just try on all of them, the strong, the weak, the kind, the mean. Maybe I'm just a mean person. Maybe I'm like taking a whole bunch of time in video chat with 9 people because I'm a mean person. And that's wonderful. I get to be mean. And because I give myself permission to put on that mask, I'm not like deducting the permission from myself. Like, I'm allowed to take up the space because I'm willing to be like, maybe I'm like intrusive and invasive and annoying in this temporary moment. And I can enjoy trying that on, and then I can take it off and be like, maybe I'm not. Yes, Anne-Marie would like to say something. Anne-Marie, you're muted.
Sorry, I was just holding down the space bar. I thought that worked to unmute, but obviously not. But anyway, I Googled performative contradiction this morning because I wanted to clarify my understanding too. An example that I saw cited somewhere which like really helped me understand it. I will share with you in a moment. And so for me, that feels very, very different to this idea of context-dependent responses or choices, or the play with masks or whatever. It feels like there's actually a fundamental and crucial difference. So the example I saw was if I was to say, I am dead, that would be a performative contradiction, because if I were dead, I probably wouldn't be able to say that. So there's something about that thing of the foundational conditions making it impossible to do the thing, rather than those things being just like different states that are moved into and out of.
So I looked that up as well. It also feels very similar to, that's why I was trying to get a clearer sense of where we're trying to go with the definition. One of the ideas that came to mind was also how you would, some of the philosophical definitions around God, for example, right? Like you could ask, can God create a rock that he is unable to lift, right? If he's able to create a rock that he's unable to lift, then by definition, he's not an all-powerful God, right? But if he's unable to create a rock that he is unable to lift, by definition as well, he is not an all-powerful God. And so that to me suggests the same level of kind of performative contradiction, but I don't know if that's the kind of contradiction or conflict that we're trying to talk through.
I want to bring in on a different level the trickster archetype, which is the only god that has the permission to trick himself.
Second.
Go ahead, John.
I've just had a little bit more thought about your earlier question, Trish, about how Ken talks about performative contradiction. And he does aim it particularly at postmodernism, and he talks about a major idea of postmodernism is that truth is relative. Everybody has their own truth. There's no such thing as objective truth. And yet, that type of statement, that truth is relative, is a universal statement which is true for everybody. And also, truth is relative, everyone's entitled to their own truth. However, if you don't agree with me on that, then you're just being racist or sexist or homophobic or whatever. So on the surface, that pluralistic postmodern green stance sounds very inclusive and pluralistic and multicultural, respecting of diversity. However, if you don't agree with all that, then you're being you're being patriarchal or you're being sexist or whatever. It doesn't really allow room for genuine diversity at different levels and stages of development.
Yeah. One of the things that comes from postmodernism, that I was more aware of, exploring Habermas a little bit more, is the notion that language itself would start to or we'd start to become aware of the contradictions that were there within the language that we use. So we'd start to become aware of things like you can't have inclusion without having exclusion, actually. Like that would start to be a known fact about what the term referred to, and that it would then be possible to make choices about behavior in new ways. And for Habermas, that would be moral and ethical ways kind of thing of behaving then become apparent to us because we're now aware of this contradiction. That's not what's happened kind of thing, right? In our post-truth world, it's become that anything goes without any awareness of the performative contradiction of not all truths are equally true and all that sort of stuff. That side of it's been let go of. Richard Feynman's world of whatever kind of thing is sort of what has become the case instead. Yeah, Mike.
I think this is what I was getting at with introducing that concept of the whole on, Trish, is that there's a way in which, you're mentioning you can't have kind of inclusiveness without exclusiveness. And I think that's true because they're both kind of the two sides of the same coin, which is really a discussion that's built on multiplicity, the idea of a whole lot of separate things somehow wanting to come together. And we have this discussion then about inclusiveness and exclusiveness. There's another way of understanding that or being aware of it, which is in a more holistic sense. And an example would be, if we really have a sense of the human family, it's a concept that transcends ideas of inclusiveness and exclusiveness. It's not about promoting one or the other. And I think to go back to what you were saying, John, that we often refer to the kind of the failure in the green mean. Its shortcomings as being that attempt to kind of impose this value system about plurality, diversity, and inclusiveness, as if that can be kind of legislated or orchestrated rather than it come from a natural process of transcendence and emerging in a new awareness.
Yeah. The other thing I can think of as well in terms of what Elliot was talking about in connection to the masks is one of the things that a post-rational consciousness invites us to, I guess, as well, is to not be resistant to any of the possible masks, no matter what they are, and the invitation to that in terms of being willing. And if we think about that little framing that I did before of destroy, deduct, deconstruct, or degenerate, it's to inhabit a mask for as long enough as is beneficial to all sentient beings in, whatever frame I'm holding in my mind, and then allowing the mask to completely disappear in order to reappear if needed at that moment when it's beneficial again, kind of thing as well. But in that kind of mindset, then you don't have to throw away anything. It's the thing, everything actually has a potential benefit, a potential use. It's more the awareness of awareness which helps you to appreciate inclusivity as appropriate at that point in time. There's interesting questions there still for philosophy of language in terms of how does inclusivity even have meaning without exclusivity kind of thing as well. There's sort of more abstract things to ponder in that sense as well, but certainly in a post-rational sense of because what you can then do as well is kind of embrace simplicity, because everyone loves that. That's always a popular thing to do, embrace the simplicity kind of thing. But if you've actually got your attention honed finely enough, simplicity unfolds for itself, right? It actually, the context and what it's calling you into allows for the expression of whatever needs to be expressed, no matter how abhorrent that may be for a person level interpretation kind of thing. And holding in mind as well, okay and not okay as basic guidance, you know, around do no harm to others, so do no harm to the world, that sort of thing, kind of thing too, that would still be there as well. Yeah. Anything else bubbling up? Yeah, John?
Oh, sorry. I thought that article that you posted in the group a week or two ago, Trish, I thought there was an example of a performative contradiction in the article that was about misogyny and masculinity. And I had another look at it this morning, and it confirmed for me my original impression that there was a performative contradiction in there, although there is also a fair bit of validity in the article. And the article, in the simplest form, the argument for me went that all men are misogynist on a spectrum. Misogyny is built into masculinity. Masculinity itself is toxic. Toxic masculinity is a tautology because all masculinity is toxic. And the solution to that is to involve men more in the raising of children. It was deconstructing masculinity, and then in a sense it was saying, and yet what we need is more good, healthy men to be involved in the raising of children. So I could see it. I could see a softer version of that would be more valid than the hardline version that the article took. And I could really see a performative contradiction in that article.
Yeah, that was the GQ one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is itself is a male journal too. So, which is interesting.
Yeah. There's so many interesting things to go into there. Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, we don't want to go into a whole gender thing either now, but no, yes, it was an example of a performative contradiction to me anyway.
It feels to me that there's a performative contradiction for the writer in the form of virtual signaling in that that it's, I think that let's say like the truth is perhaps more relative than claimed, but that the author perhaps wants to present that in a more kind of like from the expert black and white perspective for the purposes of being seen in a certain way, and that for me feels like where part of the contradiction is.
Yeah, I'd hopped away for a minute to bring it back to mind. But yeah, sorry, John, did you have something?
No, that was all.
Okay.
Yeah. It was certainly worth reading, and I did reflect, and I did have to reflect a little bit myself as to what extent I might be misogynist. So it had value. I'm glad you posted it.
Yeah. But I mean, that well, for my take on it as well, it's culture co-ops the misogyny that females are part of that whole enactment is not distant. Like that is what I'd say, kind of thing as well. We're co-opted together, kind of thing. There's the structure of it. Yeah, Anne Marie.
So this is looping away from the article that you're discussing, but I'm just having a further thought about my previous comment, and that is around still with the theme of being clear about this fundamental requirement that the foundation for something makes it impossible for the I can't quite find the language for this, for the proposed expression or something. So anyway, it takes me to the thought of capacities coming and going. So rather than just as a live person, I can permanently never truthfully say I am dead. There may be capacities in my being that are shifting moment to moment, which then make my actions or expressions performative, contradictions or not. I don't know if I articulated that very well.
Yeah, one way I can connect to that is to think about we have, by virtue of our cultures, perhaps a capacity to step into the awareness of when a part of ourselves dies, right? I am dead as a something that for a version of self that is no longer really, you know, the self that is consciously inhabited, that fits for it. Like we can have these little experiences that would connect to what is otherwise seemingly a contradictory statement, but that gives us insight into the nature of what is on the other side of the contradiction, if that makes sense. Like, and our culture gives us material in this. We could be a ghost, or we could be a zombie, or we could be up in heaven with God, or whatever, you know, reincarnated. There's lots of ways to get to the other side of deadness, kind of thing. And again, this is post-rational skills, perhaps, is the way, in a way as well, is what is it to think into the is not of the is, if that makes sense. And contradictions give us good, you know, a good framework for that kind of journey, for that exploration. Yeah, Elliot.
So to think of things lost on the journey to growth in complexity. There's something a 5-year-old can do is in that they can have a tantrum, and anyone older than that can't really do that anymore. We sort of grow out of it and don't let ourselves do that thing, that stubborn certainty of exactly what we want. There's this teenager camaraderie sort of growing out of that Keegan stage 3, I and all my friends are alike, which we sort of grow out into realizing that actually we're all kind of different. And as we grow up, parts that dream dies. And in a struggling to link that back to performative contradiction, but that thing that we were certain we were has to die in order for us to grow up.
Yeah, that's much more connecting though as well to these ideas about conscious degeneration or conscious
Yes, that's right. That was linked in there.
Yeah, absolutely, kind of thing. Like what is it to engage in practices? And in our current, it's actually really relevant to our current context. What is it to engage in practices that consciously de-develop things, kind of thing as well? And what do we, you know, what's the most helpful frame, kind of thing for that? It comes in terms of if you've noticed a contradiction and you want to step out of it, do you destruct, do you deduct, do you deconstruct, or do you degenerate, kind of thing as well, right? And then presumably context specific indicators for what's most relevant, what's going to support selving the most, what's going to support the whole the most, depending on where your focus is, kind of thing as well. The permeation of those two things, if you're into permeability, all that sort of stuff. Like, yeah.
There's one thing that I found on the first retreat in terms of one of the themes there was the paradoxes.
Mm-hmm.
And the paradox of growth. In some ways, in order to grow up, I need to reject myself. I need to be like, it's not okay how I am. And in other ways, I need to accept myself. And when I accept myself as I am with my limits, then I can climb up.
Yeah.
But then I can let go of them. And there's a paradox in there that is I guess you could call it a performative contradiction as well. That was really like one of the things that I had to discover back then to grow.
I think that might be about being able to consciously choose what you use rather than it being concrete. I have to go. It's been really fun. Thank you everyone
Thank you.
for having me. Nice to meet
Thank
you
you
all.
for coming. Nice to meet you. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, hope to run into you all again. Bye.
Yeah, we might, because we have, it's the other thing I'm aware of as well. We haven't taken a break, so we might wrap it up within about the next 10 minutes, although we're pretty close to the end now anyway. And if we say 10 minutes, we usually take 15 at least, so we're all good. But yes, I think we're at a good place. Was there anything else or in between? Shadow we haven't really touched on yet. I'm sorry, Ryan. Yeah.
I guess I was just going to ask the question. I feel like we've kind of been going around trying to figure out what performative contradiction means, which is interesting on a, I guess, a definition or philosophical level. But I feel like we're missing a place that we're trying to get to with the conversation. Is there once you understand what a performative contradiction is, what is it we're trying to get out of that definition?
It was not, well, so this is pretty common for our kind of conversations in terms of fleshing out of what could this be, sort of thing that goes on. It was more to see if it was helpful or useful in terms of a way to conceptualize what happens for us, kind of thing, particularly in terms of if we're shifting into, I don't know, construct awareness kind of thing, if I use that term, if that makes some sense. Okay. So second tier kind of realizations. What's often discombobulating, I guess, that I can appreciate at that point is the ways that contradictions keep showing up, kind of thing too, and the way that that particular meaning shift kind of thing as well, of opposites being implied by what is, kind of thing, or contradictions being implied by what is, start to become something that can't be ignored. And that, but we're not really given very many tools about how to resolve that. For good reasons, kind of thing as well. The resolution points will be so varied and unique that there are no real tools that you can use. What this kind of conversation then becomes is a process sharing kind of thing as well, about when I found that, I used a felt sense, or embodiment really helped me. Does that make sense? So it starts to become, by virtue of sharing an exploration about what does this mean, we become able to leverage a collective sense for us kind of thing about how we'd step into a space now informed by this new concept, or a concept we mightn't have thought very much about before.
Thanks.
Yeah, Elliot?
I would add that what I've gotten so far out of the discussion is this question around being with. In what ways and how do I be with the performative contradiction? And I get to now spend the next couple of weeks watching myself try on performative contradiction and see what it is to be with that. I get to be the mean one, and how do I feel about being mean, and how do I interact with that? And ultimately, I want a world with less meanness, but maybe I need to step into meanness to take other meanness out of the world, or some other strategy that I want to permit myself. So being able to explore is encouraging me. How do I be with that?
Okay.
Cool. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, John?
I just had a thought going back to our earlier discussion about contradictions in our current historical situation. The main performative contradiction that I'm noticing in my own life at the moment is that I'm really moving very much into this social isolation and minimising activities and going out and so on. And I'm really appreciating it and enjoying it. At the same time, I'm becoming more aware of how dependent I am on other people in the society still going about their everyday activities and still, you know, stocking the supermarkets and still making sure the NBN's running and still making sure the lights are going on and still being mailed to the front door. And so I'm taking advantage of all of the isolation, but I'm still wanting society to go on pretty as much as possible as normal. And to me, there's a contradiction in that. I don't know whether, well, it is a performative contradiction too. I think it's just something, as earlier just saying, just to be aware of and to live with.
That's a really interesting insight, John. I would actually throw, I think, in that same context or same bucket of performative context is the idea that as much as we're all continuing to use different tools and concepts to help increase our awareness and find out where some of these different boundaries lie, inherently, I think there is an element that we're not able to be aware of everything all at once, and therefore a lot of the mechanisms that our brains and bodies have developed over the years to tackle those and simplify the world for us are also the things that allow us to have those higher levels of function and stuff as well. And so there's this interesting contradiction there around wanting to find more awareness where we've actively built up mechanisms to not need to be as aware about all those things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and there's the part, I guess, the two aspects of it. What do we attend to in terms of just being able to continue functioning, kind of thing as well, so that yeah, the way our attention has been honed just to let us do stuff. There's also, I guess, the opportunities to consider how has my attention been honed to what is in a particular way, which is more psychological kind of thing as well, which is more about the meaning. Speaking with a group like this is usually preaching to the converted in terms of, you know, extending consideration for others and all that kind of stuff. It's usually a foregone conclusion, but well, John's is a good point, I guess, in that kind of a way as well. Like, to become more aware is to also go, yeah, what do I do about that? Is there anything I can do about that kind of thing as well? Or how do I interact with that newly now, now that I'm kind of recognizing that? So it's a psychological aspect of it, given what we can hold attention to in terms of attention at the moment. And noticing as well, just in terms of the amount of change that we're going through, to ask too much cognitive load is actually not okay either, kind of thing as well. Like, there's a certain amount that we can deal with and then that our brains can't deal with, kind of thing too. Our brains rely in a lot of ways on things being very similar through time, even though we're novelty seekers at the same time. Oh, more contradictions. See, they're everywhere. And then, Anne-Marie, did you have...
Trish, you muted yourself just.
I did. I slid. Yeah, I get all happy with the mouse. Yeah. To check, Anne-Marie, did you have anything else?
No, not really. Just the ongoing internal process of pondering this very, very interesting topic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might have to take Shadow to another meeting to do find it kind of closing circle things. Mike, did you have anything else or anything to add?
No, I feel like I've sort of been deprived of the really exciting bit, you know, which is where all the dark things come out of the closet, which was potential in the next topic, but that can be for another time.
Yeah, we'll do Shadow next time for sure, kind of thing. Kat?
I feel like we went a lot into abstract rather than experiential due to the nature of it being online. And I'm feeling the sort of loss of that. And I'm wondering if there's a way we can bring this into our experience of what we can use it and make it more real.
Yeah, we could I've been thinking a little bit about that, and maybe sticking more with the questions and going around with everybody answering one of the questions or something like that might be a way to connect it back to experience, which was good to have, because I'm probably the guilty party in terms of the abstract stuff, because that's what I like. But yeah, that might be one way to do it next time. We can certainly give that a go.
Yeah, I really do enjoy the abstract as well, and I think after the retreat, there's been a lot more of a shift in that in me, in valuing not just the content, but then like the experiential nature of that in a deep way. So yeah, I'm not sure if there's a way of us being able to, you know, pick a performative contradiction that we use and then play with that somehow, or point it out in others, or make it more of an emotionally cognizant experience.
Yeah, or bring a dark shadow stuff, to Mike's point.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, if we do that stuff in person in group as well, it's easier to have riskier conversations because we can read people better as well. Yeah. And we know when we can push the lines and like push and say, like, I see that shadow bit, or I see that contradiction in you, and bring it out, and people can have that sense of shift and being seen in themselves in a way. And I'm not sure there's a way of doing that in a Zoom setting that isn't as risky, or
Yeah, the way I've seen it working is for people, but we do, it needs a lot of trust. So mostly what you need is people who have worked together for quite some time in the in-person space. It can then shift online, or with enough meditative and contemplative stability is the other place that I've actually seen it work as well. So with enough kind of shared quietness, if that makes sense. So it's safe, really. Yeah, cool, thank you. Lou, did you have anything just funnily as well? Who mightn't be able to easily change to, oh no, and with a mouthful of food. Good time to catch you.
Yeah, just digesting stuff. So yeah, I'm a digester. I probably need to rewatch and let it all in.
Yeah, cool. All right, thank you. Okay, and then to check with Elliot.
I would I'd love to do shadow next time. Definitely do that. I like the idea of something more interactive, and I know it's going to be really hard to work out. But I noticed a bunch earlier that I just don't have a structure in which to hold the fact that I'm in fact talking to 9 people. Like, my brain keeps saying I'm talking to a phone. If I'm in person, I feel the felt sense of the room, and I do all of the like the we space sort of stuff. But here, I don't have a bucket to put 9 different people in because it doesn't feel like 9 people. So maybe there is some structure or some process that we can share to try and feel like there is in fact 9 of us, or feel into the fact that there is 9 in the conversation.
There's actually a screen setting, Elliot, where you can see everyone's faces.
Not on my phone, I don't think.
If you slide across to the bottom,
4. Maximum of 4.
So maybe having a big screen computer might help with seeing everyone's faces at once.
But even so, like, I can't feel it as much.
Yeah.
It does improve though when you can see everybody at the same time on screen. It really helps. Yeah.
Yes.
What I like about it is that our contexts are becoming real. So as a context freak kind of thing as well, like the context of each person's lived life is now something that's shared kind of thing too. So yeah, it's a little bit more, a little bit less, because the real embodied presence with each other is probably much more valuable kind of thing, but this is a little bit more. Yeah, okay, thank you.
I'm not certain about that structure, but yeah, I love being with the brilliant people that make me really think really hard. Like, oh my God, so many more papers to read, and so much more to like process and look at the world in a different way.
Or not.
Or not. I mean, I'm just loving it anyway.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, just to check quickly with Ryan, did you have anything extra that you wanted to pop in? Not too much?
Not really. I'd probably echo some of the other comments at the end about it being more interactive or something like those. I can also get highly abstract and whatnot, and I didn't have enough context maybe going into the session about what we were trying to go out of, which is what stemmed my last question. So yeah, it's more just for me helping to kind of know whether we're off in abstract land, which I'm happy to play with, or trying to be a bit more practical or directed. That gives me a bit more context. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think that the contradictions that we see in ourselves, I think, is always something to reflect better on, and it's particularly something that it's one of the primary things that I observe in my behavior that drives me to actually continue to look for other frameworks and tools to either better understand them or to have more control over when they manifest themselves. And so, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you're sort of bringing me to wonder, because I love doing all the theory stuff. I do and this kind of context is awesome for theoretical conversations. So we could split them up maybe, or start. We did used to do a bit of that, running different streams kind of thing, and then have a much more philosophically interrogative kind of conversation, which can stay out of and is better off for staying out of lived experience perhaps as well. Just to check, John, did you have anything before we better?
Yes, two things. One, on the one hand, it is a lot easier just to stay at home and have this conversation without having to hop on trains and all that to get to a meeting. And it's quite relaxed in that way. On the other hand, I really do miss the embodied contact. And to be honest, I miss the hugs. You can't really do hugs online, and I think I'm going to find more and more over the next few weeks that I'm going to miss that physical embodied contact with people more and more. In terms of looking ahead a bit, Mike made interesting comments there earlier, which we haven't followed up on, but I think over the next few months we'll have more opportunities to do this, and I will really appreciate having this group to do this. To look at where society might be going as a result of this meta crisis, as Jordan Hall calls it. And I think, and as John Vervaeke calls it, the meaning crisis, I think we're really going to have to give a fair bit of consideration to what this bigger picture is going to mean for us. And it'll take months and maybe even 12 months or even longer for all this to become clearer. But I'm really glad that we've got a group, some kind of a group structure where we can figure out some of this stuff together. So I guess that again is getting to the intellectual stuff that you mentioned, Trish, which I also really like. And I think maybe on the other hand, one way of bringing a bit more of the intimacy and embodiment that we're talking about, that Kat suggested, we need to balance with the more embodied, practical awareness type juicy stuff as well. So we need some kind of a balance there. I'm feeling quite energised at the end of this, and I'm glad I've had the opportunity. Thank you all.
Yeah, Mike?
Just wanted to say that I wanted to echo thoughts there from John and from Kat and from others, Ryan, that there's an art to doing this well, I think, that creates the fullest experience for all of us, the fullest way to participate for all of us, and compensates just whatever degree we can for the limitations of the media. And I do have some ideas that not from me, but from some other people who have more experience of doing this, who are really big on embodiment practice and trying to get it to work in an online setting. And so you know, maybe leading up to the next one, I'll exchange that with anyone who's interested, and we can see what the format might be.
Do you want to post it on that text chat, the Facebook Messenger chat?
Oh, okay, I will do.
Yeah, I'm super
Thank you.
interested to hear about that, Mike, and to participate in it.
I would have thought you could bring some insights for us too, Anne-Marie.
Well, maybe, I don't know. I'm not particularly schooled in this kind of, haven't given much attention to vivifying online work, but I want to develop my interest and knowledge and capacity and experience in that way. So really welcome hearing your suggestions. Might spark other ideas too.
Cool. Okay. All right.
A technical perspective, how to facilitate more of these things, if that's helpful. I'll look forward to learning more from you guys around how to do more of the interactive and the other aspects of this.
I have a sense that Zoom might not be the platform in the future.
Oh.
Well, I came across I'll send it into the group chat, a link by Seth Godin, who wrote it the other day about this shift to online, and about the idea that if we go to what's always been done, it's always been a lesser version of in-person. And what if we could actually find a way to make it better than in person? What if we could use the technology and use our creativity and find a way to enhance the experience in a way that you cannot do in another format? And so I'll send the link through. It talks about some ideas of that, but maybe we can also come up with our own of ways of whether that means we split into small groups of 3 for little breakout sessions, which is one of the suggestions he had, or whether it's something else in a way that gives us more of that embodied experience whilst being in our own context.
Great.
Yeah, sounds good. Cool. All right. Share ideas kind of thing, it sounds like, and put them all together. What we could do is aim to come together maybe fortnightly rather than monthly, if that seems, like that might be one way to do this, because it doesn't involve John getting on a train, so it's a lot
Everything else that I had in my diary has cancelled as well.
Yeah,
so
that's
I'm
right.
free.
Because the other thing I've actually been thinking of as well, though, to think about future embodied possibilities is maybe going together like for bushwalks and that sort of thing, where we're able to maintain distance, won't involve hug, still getting together just out in nature kind of thing as well, like whether there's that sort of thing actually possible.
I'm actually on my way to a picnic today in Centennial Park, so I really like the idea of that. Being out in nature and enjoying it in that way.
Yeah,
I think that's lovely.
I've enjoyed taking the journey there with you, Kat.
I am almost there.
And Coles. I thought we went to Coles. Okay. All righty. Take care, everybody. It's been
Thank you.
Thanks for organising, Trish.
Thank you for coming. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.